live. Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Drawing for Tattooers. This morning we have Elise and Steve and Jesse. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Hello.
Steven's still connecting to audio. I'm gonna read my announcements. We'll get that. We'll get that out of the way. It's always good. It's always good to start off with, the obligations. Um, let's see. If this is working for you, make sure to let us know in the chat. Um, Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Drawing for Tattooers. I'm your host, James Wisdom. This is Guy Atchison's Reinventing the Tattoo community, where tattooers, apprentices, collectors, and the curious are all encouraged to join in these live and streamed events. Our goal is to inspire and ultimately create better art and tattoos together. We beam out nearly every single day, and with your help, we've become a quality network of live and on-demand tattooing and art shows. You can find out more at reinventingthetattoo.com, and that's my cue to go to reinventingthetattoo.com. Yeah, cool. Right, so you can hopefully you can see it. Yeah, so yeah, you can find out more here at reinventingthetattoo.com. We're also available at the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store, where you can get the Reinventing the Tattoo app. We can have access to all the educational content as well as the community, Reinventing the Tattoo community. Very cool. But we also have a YouTube channel, Facebook page, as well as a Roku. So you can find out more at reinventingthetattoo.com/Roku. You can also catch us on all the major podcast directories, such as Apple and Spotify. But no matter where you're getting us from, you can always find the latest and greatest here at reinventingthetattoo.com. We have a number of weekly staple shows. Oh, and then once a month or so, we have Paint Night with Renee Little. So I think that's tonight. So yeah, our number of weekly staple shows you can find here at the events schedule. Beginning on Sundays at 1 p.m., we have the Sunday Skill Building Drawing Group hosted by Jason Leeser. That's followed on Mondays at 9 a.m. Eastern, Drawing for Tattooers. That's this show. You're here. At 11 a.m. on Mondays, we have the Tattoo Weekly. 5 p.m., we have Let's Talk About Feelings, 5 p.m. Mondays, hosted by Robbie Ripple. Tonight, we have Paint Night, hosted by Renee Little. That's coming up at 6 p.m. tonight, Monday, the 27th. At 9 p.m. Eastern, we have the Reinventing subscribers exclusive drawing group. So that's Monday, a busy day on Monday. But check out all the content. Wednesdays at 1 p.m. we have the Tattoo Now show, and at 6 p.m. on Thursdays we have the Tattoo Collecting 101 podcast. So let's see. We'd like to take a moment and thank our sponsors. And let's see if I can get there. Can I move this thing? Yes. Right. Cool. Tattoo Now. Tattoo Now is a technology company for tattooers, and it's for all skill levels. So make sure to check out Tattoo Now if you want to take your communication to the next level. It's also an incredible portfolio website where you can save all of your high resolution images. This is great for print publications. But as well as just as a great place, as a great space to to display your artwork. So this is Tattoo Now. Ask for Gabe. He'll be able to help you out, right? And of course, it wouldn't be reinventing the tattoo if not for Guy Aitchison. So we want to, thanks to Guy Aitchison for being the founder and inspiration behind Reinventing the Tattoo and Reinventing the Tattoo community. You can learn more about Guy Aitchison at GuyAitchison.com, where you can find original artwork, custom prints, as well as foil machines and other educational content. Just a very cool site. So be sure to check out GuyAitchison.com. And I think with that, we did it. Yeah, cool. Hey, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How's it going?
Morning.
Steven, what's up?
Good morning. Hanging out in
Morning.
the dark. How are you guys today?
We're doing good.
Good.
Pretty good.
Amber, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm recovering. I went camping with 20 Girl Scouts over the weekend.
Wow. Sounds like fun.
Oh, we had a great time, but not a lot of sleep was had. Lots of being up all night, giggling with the girls and playing games.
Were you a Girl Scout?
I've been a Girl Scout since I was 5 years old, and it hasn't changed. I don't even have any kids in the troop. One of the moms asked me over the weekend, she's like, wait a minute, none of these kids are yours? I was like, no, I'm just one of the leaders. And she's like, what's wrong with you? Are you okay?
Oh, it's good to
I'm a
have
Girl
someone there.
Scout. I bleed green.
All I ever did
Yes.
was buy the cookies.
We're selling cookies now. It's a push to the end.
We got Creature in the chat. Good morning, Creature.
Good
Good morning, creature.
Cool. Yeah, it's Monday. It's like the end of March. It's almost April. I can't believe it.
I know, it's going by so fast.
Yeah.
It is. It is going by fast. Yeah, but time flies, right? When you're having fun. And so I've just been working on tattoos and drawing, trying to keep up with everything. It really is. It can be overwhelming, or you know what I mean, like. But I've been finding a lot of relief, or it's helping. It feels like it's helping a lot. Making plans, making lists, taking one thing at a time. One day at a time. Not getting too overwhelmed by by everything that's seems to be happening all at once. So, but I guess that's something that I'm curious about you all. How are you managing, right? How are you dealing with all of the stresses that life is putting on you at this point?
If anybody knows the secret, let me know.
I was
go to
gonna
the
say.
shop. I go to the shop and all the stress is gone.
Oh, can I come to your shop?
Feel
You ain't
free.
been in the game long enough if all the stress is gone,
Yeah.
Oh, I know. I
Lord.
love being in the shop. It's much quieter and calmer than it is at home.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And that's saying something.
Well, my customer last night was tattooing her throat, and just we got to the end of it, and she says, something about the needle. It just takes all the stress away. And I was like, it makes sense. It totally makes sense. But I was like, man, your throat too. It's
Oh, I can't
even
imagine.
that part. It was pretty. I think it was pretty informative and pretty interesting. I think sometimes you can get nervous about a really painful spot, right? If you're going to get a tattoo done and it's in a spot that you know is going to be uncomfortable, I think that can get the nerves worked up for sure. So, but yeah, it was. I thought it was very cool outlook on things. So
Being tattooed is like therapy for me.
I've heard that. I've heard that. Um, no, it's that's awesome. Well, so um, today, uh, today I'm going to, I wanted to talk a little bit about cast shadows and stuff. I thought it was something that would be, an interesting topic. Um, it can be, it can be really, I think, almost mysterious, sort of like, how do we kind of capture the depth, right? The space that can be created, when we're making images. And so, actually had a couple of examples for some books that I wanted to share, and I'm hoping that it will help. Just get the ideas sort of going for us. Like, how can we do it more effectively? How can we sort of make a convincing cast shadow, working with shadows, and in this way, uh, I think you know we more effectively communicate the idea that we have in mind, right? Um, so let me go ahead and I'll share my screen with you. See if we can get it.
Never gets
One
easier.
moment. I know, right? Like all of the technical difficulties. Let's see here. All right. Hopefully, I should be able to share it now. Here we go. Cool. All right. So hopefully, oh, wrong page. Hopefully, you're seeing my screen.
Yep.
Okay. Is there one more page? Yeah, there's one more page. Okay. One more page. Right. So, really, this is from Ernest Norling's Perspective Made Easy. This is a really, I think, handy book, especially if you're interested in learning more about perspective. Shadows are always about perspective. And it's been explained to me, I've heard this before, that we only really see in two dimensions anyway, like height and width, and then depth is really sort of produced for us through light, right, through shadows and stuff. I know that may sound weird, but just that's kind of like it's sort of something that happens in our you know in our imaginations, kind of. But it helps us understand the world around us, right? So we can have a sense of depth. It exists, but we don't. It's like, how do we perceive it? Through light, right? If we didn't have light, we wouldn't be able to see anything, of course. So, so anyway, when you're thinking about like how to work with shadows, uh, it really is about like producing a sense of depth, and also I think that the um, something that can be really helpful to remember, right? Especially if you have a highlight, right? If you're thinking about where the light source is located, the highlight tells you where the light source is in relationship to the object. The shadows and the casted shadows, they're going to reinforce this idea. So wherever you see the cast shadows, um, wherever you see the highlight, right? They all sort of point towards towards the light is coming from. And so we'll see some examples here. Sometimes we have light source. Guy Etchison refers to this as an off-camera light source, right? So there'll be a light source that's not inside of your composition. It's coming from outside, right? The other way to refer to it is on camera. So there's a light source that's that's within the composition. And hopefully today we'll sort of go over a couple like sort of basic things that can help you sort of relate these informations in your drawings. And it is always something I think that we can all work on. And so anyway, here we have this example. You're looking at it right now of a brick. Those of you who are, if you're listening to this, we're looking at a brick that's getting some light cast on it. And so here we see these two examples. One is referred to as the shaded side, and the other side, or the other portion of it, is referred to as the shadow side. I think that you can also think of this in terms of shadow on the form shadow, or what's being pointed out here is the shaded side, or the casted shadow, right? That's the shadow that's on the ground or on some other surface, right? It's the shadow that's being cast by an object, the casted shadow. And there's a difference too, we'll see some of this later between a cast shadow and a drop shadow. Drop shadow is something that's just sort of simple darkness underneath an object that helps to sort of lift it up a little bit. And a cast shadow really kind of shows a bit more depth, right? It actually is the shape. So right. So here we have this object, and it's not directly lighted, right? There's a shaded side, right? And the shade on the object it's usually easier to determine than drawing the shadow, right? So you can always see that this, if you're looking at something, you can always see it's whether it has a plane that's in shadow, right? Or it can be more challenging to cast the shadow. That's essentially what we're talking about here. All right, so a brick laying in the sun stops a portion of the sunlight from reaching an area. That's this area of shadow on the ground that we're talking about here. The shape of the shadow depends on three things: the direction of the sun or the light source, the position of the brick, the shape of the area on which the shadow falls. Right, so pretty straightforward, but light source, the object itself, and then what is it going, what is the shadow being cast on, so as the sun moves, the shadow changes. The brick may be thought of in this instance as a sundial. If the brick is moved, the shadow is changed. Okay. So here is just a quick example of just sort of how we can think about it. This is in what, so we're thinking about perspective, but rather than, get super duper complicated, this is isometric, right? Perspective. So all these lines are really just, they're really just sort of parallel to each other, right? So we can see that there's a horizontal line that's drawn from each of these corners of the shaded side of the form shadow, right? And then the diagonal lines are all parallel to each other wherever they meet up, right? That's how you know the contours of the cast shadow, right? This is when you see it and you see it shaded, it's like, oh, there it is. It feels like that would be the relief, right? That would be the shape of this brick. Again, I think this can be something that you can actually practice, right? If you draw a simple shape, and then you can just again think of a triangle, right? Light source is coming from one spot, from one direction, right? Some simple horizontal lines where they intersect. This can be a way for you to do some simple, cast of shadows for objects and practice it. And it can be really quite convincing, I think. And then, in this instance, for the simple illustrations, we just have, just different directions of lines, and it produces different effects as far as the rendering goes. So we can see a difference between the shaded side of the object and the cast shadow on the ground. But of course, you can push this idea further. If the brick is, say, darker than the ground that it's sitting on, or vice versa, whatever, you can push one of these to be, more of a positive negative situation, a pos-neg. So you can have one thing that's darker, and then this brick could be darker than the ground again, something like that kind of a relationship, right? So again, that's what all this text is exculpating, is talking about. We stand the brick on a flat surface, and then we assume that the sun is to our left. This position of the light source is usually assumed for whatever reason, and then except in the case where the object is being sketched and is lighted otherwise. So he's talking about that this time of the day is this sort of gives us this sort of appearance. But I think clearly what we can see from the illustration is that this works. Like, you can have this isometric sort of relationship. We have a very simple, very simple object and very simple, kind of thought about the light source. You can just draw it this way. It does work. It can become very complicated, to deal with it. So this is why I do like this kind of straightforward, very simplified kind of cast a shadow recipe, if you like. Okay, so we won't get into all of again. So if you read this book, you can really dig down into into what is being talked about here. Here he's just joining these points, right? Like uppercase A to lowercase a, that sort of a thing, and that's how it's explained down here. Okay. Again, this same example, but just from a different angle, right? And then you connect the dots. In this way, you can really start to dig in and make some really interesting sorts of shapes happen whenever you're drawing, an object. Want to give it a strong light source. You can start to figure it out. Why? Because you're already thinking about a highlight, right? You're probably already thinking about where's the light source at? How am I going to shade it? How am I going to produce a casted shadow? This is the sort of the way to think of it. Like, where the light's coming from because you've already imagined that, and so you can you just take it to the next step, right? Hit each one of these points. So again, this is an example, like, the angle is steeper, right? So he says the sun is higher in the sky, so the angle is steeper. We're having a different triangle shape. And thus we get this, much more sort of stumpier kind of casted shadow here. All right. So again, so in this example, if we have like another plane, right? So in this case, like there's like a little wall, put a little card or something like that. It's intersecting the shadow. So the shadow is being cast against the ground, right? And then it's in this example, it's sort of going up against a vertical surface. Well, this could happen like in so many different instances, right? There's some object that's next to, to another. It's casting a shadow that goes up onto its surface, right? So again, it does get complicated, but if you start and if you really start to look for these angles, it can really help you start to invent or discern where the shadow might be. Okay, so what do we have here, right? We've got this vertical surface, right? Again, this object, just sort of thinking about it like in the simplest sort of cast shadow relationship, shadows being cast on the ground, right? Where it intersects with the with the vertical surface, right? Again, we're seeing it climb up this wall, right? Again, it's all about intersecting with the various, with all the angles. So this top corner here, again, it should, if this vertical wall was in place, it would be cast all the way to the ground, but because of its intervention, right, we see it intersects here with the angle, right? You can practice this. It can really be helpful. So I hope that that's coming across, that's coming through for you. I think if we just see it without the guidelines, it can really just be almost like intuitive, like, yeah, that makes sense. But seeing these helpful guidelines really kind of brings it more into a concept for us. I really hope so. I mean, I think that's, for me, it's a part of how I've internalized it to quite an extent, and I find it really helpful. So right, again, like here's another example. Like you have a different angle, it's going to affect the shape of it. We can almost start to think about, like, what if it were a curved surface? How might that sort of start to travel? And so, and this is essentially what I was referring to earlier. Like, you can really imagine, like, if you have an object next to another one, and one is casting a shadow on it, how are you going to, how are you going to create that? How are you going to produce it? And so, just kind of imagining the different surfaces and how they're going to relate to the light source is a real key into how to figure it out. So again, these are all referred to as cast, but we can almost start to think of them as, like, these ones are simplified. They're really, like drop shadows. These are pretty simple. But I think when it starts getting onto these other surfaces and starts to, when you start to have some space and some light between the object, that's when you're going to think that's a cast shadow. It's much more complicated. And we have an example right here. So we have a light source, on camera light source, right? And we have a sphere that's being, it's being suspended somehow. We don't really see that how, but it's off the ground. And so we have, again, the very simple brick. The light source is much closer, right? And so in this instance, we see all of these angles. They're not all parallel anymore, right? Where before we had that isometric perspective, as if it was a very sort of, everything was related in a very simple way. In this case, what can we notice about, how this shadow on this brick is particularly, made? Well, there's a light source up here, this candle light. It's related to where it touches this flat surface, this ground, right? The same thing that this brick is sitting on, right? It's just vertically, right, related, okay? So from these 2 points, that's the vertical, and then it makes these triangles, you can see, right? So from all the way over here on the left-hand side, the first corner of the brick is related to the light source, right? And then again, it's a corresponding corner. It's touching the ground. We're drawing a triangle, right? And where they intersect, that's the corner of the shadow, and so on and so forth. And then you get this really interesting shadow shape, right? As far as the sphere goes, it's very complicated as far as how to place it, but I think what we can notice is that it's an ellipse, right? It's a very clean ellipse that's being cast against this wall. And again, we would see an ellipse. It would just be oriented differently if it were on this flat plane. But again, it's, I think finding these angles and stuff that can really be, crucial. That can really be helpful, and that's essentially what the cast shadow or any shadow that that you're dealing with is doing. It's just really telling, it's indexing the light. It's telling the viewer where the light source is. So whether it's again in this instance on camera light source or off camera light source, it's really telling us where it's located, because that's it's a story that you're telling. Like, where's the light source? It's over there. And every bit of information starts to like detail, it shows it. You're showing where that is. Right, so these little toadstools. Okay, so again, we're sort of thinking them as probably as perfectly round in this case, right? So we have these elliptical shadows that can be really useful. It can be really helpful for you. So you have some sort of rounded object, spherical object, or in this case, these rounds, ellipses, right? An ellipse can really help as far as like really depicting this shadow shape, these situations. And yeah, so I really like this little example. I think it's really nicely rendered. So if we look at it, we can examine this mushroom toadstool guy all the way over here on the left-hand side. We have what we're referring to earlier as a shaded side, or form shadow, right? Shadow on the form of this head of this mushroom, right? And of course on the body of it as well. And it's cast shadow, for sure a cast shadow, because it really is, really is depicting its shape. So again, just a very clean isometric perspective, just sort of like, just everything parallel, right? All these angles here, they're just parallel. So it's really straightforward. And I think, if you had like another little object over here, you could almost picture how it might sort of pick up the shadow and sort of put on top of its surface in different ways. These, so I think specifically, to like, to drawing platonic, solids, or these, primitive solid shapes like a cone or something like that. If there was an assignment in your class or something like that, it's like, how do I draw this thing? Here, the author has gone into some explanation of how to think about it. It's good to know. It's we're probably not drawing lots of cones all the time, but if we do. I get you do. You do draw cones all the time. It does happen. But again, they're usually more complicated, right? They're like, they're a part of another shape, or they're sort of like, like the top of a castle tower or something like that is a cone, an ice cream cone. There's all kinds of ways. You know what I mean? I think that, so ice cream cone example, right? If you get lost in doing all of the textured detail of like the waffle bit of the ice cream cone, right? That's gonna flatten it out. Instead, if you really focus on how the form of the cone, ice cream cone, right, is rendered as it's going to have some shaded side, right, some form, shadow, and then it's going to have something cast, right? You get that relationship very functional, right? You get that relationship really accurate. Then, then you can go in and do all the details of the, all the waffly bits, and it really can be wonderful. It can really be, really wonderful. So, yeah. So in summary, shadows are often so complex that it's difficult to solve the problem by mechanical methods, right? Like all the angles, like it's difficult to think of it, right? So some of these really simplified, principles, they may help clear up quite a great number of difficulties. So again, I think there's what is it that we're talking about? When we're casting a shadow, the light source. There's some object, and then there's a light source. And so if you have lots of light sources everywhere, it's like, how do you figure out where the shadows are? It's a recipe for a headache, probably. So thinking about one single light source that's the strongest one, it's going to produce some degree of shading and shadow. That's a good way to go. It's pretty much the only way we could see anyway. If everything was if all the lights were at the same level and they were coming from all directions, you couldn't see anything. So it's this was what I wanted to talk about today. And I did have another. So this is from Andrew Loomis, and let me see if I can. View. Let's see, view. This. Sorry, took me a second. Okay. I guess he doesn't like that. Sorry, gang.
No problem.
Sorry
We can still see it.
Yeah, for some reason it was telling me that it wasn't. It was telling me that it wasn't showing it or something. But I can back this up a little bit so we can see it. Okay. So in this particular example here, we're thinking of a light source. It's the sun in this particular case, right? So the sun is a particular point in the sky. And then what we have here is eye level, right? Is the horizon line, it's eye level. So it's the same thing like the candle example, right? The light source, and then it's directly vertical beneath it, right, where it intersects with eye level. This is how you would figure out how a shadow would be cast, like in the daytime, outside or something like that, right? These are the two different ways to think about how a light source is gonna cast a shadow, right? Is it the natural source, the sun, or is it an artificial one? So like a candle or a overhead light bulb or something like that. So if this is a mechanical means, like we were just sort of talking about, like it's really complicated, mechanical means, but if you really wanted to to sort of plot out like a really interesting sort of light source situation, or understand what, like if you have a photo reference or something and you're using that, it's really complicated. Like how do you even decipher it sometimes? And so you can just follow along, of course, but again, I think having it as a concept can help you navigate it quite a bit more effectively. So again, this is sort of thinking about it as a sun, the sun outside sort of situation. So I wanted to show you the simpler one, rather than this one is these are much more complicated. So, but if you get into it, I think it can again, so it can help you if you're trying to create this from your imagination. But it can also, I think, help you, if you're drawing regular objects, you're sketching, you'll have this sort of running as a program in the background, and it's there for you, even if you're not specifically thinking of it so explicitly, just sort of thinking about how to create these sorts of shapes. Let me so again, these beautiful illustrations, I think, I just want to show them off because they're so wonderful. But This light on the sphere, right? I think this is the anatomy of a shadow for sure. So I can zoom in a bit. So if we contemplate this sphere right here, light is shining on it, and all of this area is receiving, like, so 100% light right here. If you could see where my little cursor is, right in the highlight, 100% reflection of the light source, and then it's like 95%, 96%, or 94%, 93, something like that, till it gets to right here, and then it's like 40%, and then nothing, like zero, right? It's a steep drop off. The light is hitting it until it just stops hitting it. This gives us this dramatic sort of light and shadow relationship. And so we can see this darkest area here is referred to as the core, right, or the terminator. It's where the light is terminated. It's no longer hitting the surface. So we think about, like, light is hitting this little highlight spot. It's directly perpendicular, so at like a right angle. The light is hitting that, striking that spot. By the time it gets to this, the light rays that are coming down are parallel to the surface, so they're passing right by it. Now we can see this little area underneath. It's a little bit lighter, right, than this core area. This is referred to as reflected light. So light is hitting off some surface and is illuminating, this darker half of this sphere. I think the way to remember that what's going on there, of course, is that, like, this reflected light area is never going to compete with the highlight, right? You can make it really dramatic, through color, or you can push it a little bit more, but it just cannot compete with the highlight part. As long as you kind of keep that in mind, they'll be proportionate. They'll relate to each other. And so again, we're sort of seeing these cast shadows on the ground, right? And they're, for the sphere, an ellipse works really well to make to give us the cast shadow. Oh, so beautiful. So beautiful, these things.
Perfect.
So yeah, it's so complex. I like this
Oh
one.
man, the house.
Oh yeah, the house one. Let's go check that one out, right? So, God, like,
Oh, it's a tree.
it's a tree. It's like some pile of rocks. It's like a signpost or something like that. It's like,
Trees are my comfort zone. When I can't figure out what to draw or paint, I do a tree every time.
I love,
Oh my God, me
I love
too.
working with trees. And so you have all these various, like, again, it's, I like this example too. Inside light source, you've got all these figures walking around, right? How do you figure this out? Again, there's a light source, vertical from it, right? It's going to hit the plane, right? Vanishing point of the light. You can start to figure this out, right? I think we see this a lot in the work, in Guy Addison's work, to be honest. He has, like, this light source that's happening, like, sort of internally, it's on camera light source, and all these, like, there's all this sort of, like this guy is standing here in front, right? You see, like, guy will put like a space hook or something in front of, like, this glowing thing. It's like, how are you doing that? What are you thinking about, right? And it's kind of like, there's an edge light, right? There's a little bit of reflected light. This sorts of relationships are happening, but it's going to cast a shadow onto something else. And it's like there's some way that he states it in the work that he does. It does make sense. But yeah, like, so just to talk about, like you were saying, Amber, like, you think about, the tree shape or the textures and stuff like that. Again, I think just like thinking about that ice cream cone or whatever, it's like, as long as you're working on the tree and you give it its form, right? Then you can get in there and do all of the little bits. You know what I mean? All the
Mhm.
smaller shapes, right? There's a bigger shape first, and then all of the parts, right? And then it becomes harmonious for the whole entity. Um, but I know personally, this is my own tendency. It's like I want to get in there. I want to like shade all these little all. I want to shade this part right here. That's all I
Aw,
want to do. You know what I mean? I just want to. I love that. It's like it attracts me. You know what I mean? But if you can sort of zoom back and think about
the texture
the
it creates.
yeah,
Yeah.
the larger form first, and then the textures and stuff go on top of it. Um, then I think it's again it starts to it you don't like disturb that story of where the light's coming from. Light's coming from somewhere, and thus you know uh, you end up like again stating that information for the viewer. There's a big form of the tree trunk, and it has all this textural detail. So you got to put you know, the right emphasis on it. And so yeah, that's oh yeah, the house. You were asking about the house. I jumped right past it.
Oh yeah, I just saw all of the.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
um, right. Yeah, it's in like perspective books and stuff like that. There's always this they show this. It's like how do you cast the shadow of the chimney onto the pitch of a roof? And it's like you gotta. It's like there's so many angles and stuff. You gotta figure it out. It's like, well, that's why we have computers and stuff now. You know. Um, okay, so what the fuck? Why would we even waste our time? You know what I mean, doing this. Well,
Maybe because it helps you understand.
I think that it does. It can help you. It's exercise, so it's uncomfortable. This is not. It's what I mean. It is uncomfortable, especially the first time. It's like this is uncomfortable. I just want to draw pictures and stuff. But I think what it can help, it can certainly help you. Like know when something isn't accurate. Could be in your own work. Could be in somebody else's work. Um, it's the reasons to do it. I think are because it can help you grow, and it can also help you like make discernments and stuff. But again, it's like there are so many means, and so you can get lost in all of the forest of like methods and approaches and stuff like that, and that's not the point at all. The point is to set you free, right? So that way you can just you can almost effortlessly sort of put these things to paper. um, but again, I think that like just keeping it simple, like the first examples we saw where you just you just sort of imagine where the light is coming from and how would this object make it happen. i think can be uh, I think can be so incredibly useful. um, there's one last example that I'm gonna share with you all, and oh, let me see if I can find it. Hmm. Oh, I know where it is. I know where it is. Here it is. Okay. So one last example, and so if you're in the reinventing group, you've probably seen this before. So this is in the depth chapter. So if you're watching us and you haven't made it to the depth chapter, like you're in for a special treat. But this is where Guy Aitchison talks about this very subject. Um, he talks about perspective too, which I think is very cool. So all these there's some ellipses and how they work. So this is a good chapter. Um, they're all good chapters. But all right, so here, right, we're just maybe I can zoom in, maybe. Ah. Right, so we've got this like bioorganic ear hook thing, and then beautiful casted shadow that sort of lifts it up off the surface, makes it lighter in that way, right? And we think about this, I think, a lot of times, like in sculpture, like in classical sculpture, it's like making the material, uh, making the material like, sort of other than what it is, right? Making it sort of, making this sort of heavy material, marble or, or concrete or even clay or something like appear like drapery or, sort of lighter than air. Um, and so in this instance too, I think we really, you kind of sense that there's this sort of space that gets created between this object and then the surface that it's sitting on. So and this brings the body back into play in that respect, right? So cast shadow, and it just simply mirrors, it's just simply like repeating the shape of this object. So the simplest kind of like straightforward, like this is the way to think of the cast shadow. Just give it some space. And then it's not it's much sharper and much darker here, like where it feels like it's closer. And then as it gets further away, again, sort of lifting up off of the surface. And so here's a little bit of explanation. So there's a difference between drop shadows, which we use all the time without realizing it, and cast shadows, which are a bit more complex than drop shadows and can take some planning to use effectively. In the neck piece shown are examples of both drop shadows, which are essentially just areas of shading below certain objects that help lift them off the skin, and cast shadows, which are usually simplified versions of the shapes casting themselves, placed carefully to show the distance between the object and the surface while the shadow is landing. In this case, the effect is used to lift the tattoo up from the surrounding untattooed skin. So again, we can zoom in a little bit and highlight what's being talked about there, right? So just a little bit of dark, sort of, all right, it gives us a positive negative relationship there, right? So again, we really see this example of this is a surface that's receiving the light, and then the plane is sharp drop off, right? It's a core shadow or terminator shadow right here, a little bit of reflected light, and then darkness, darker underneath, that gives us the separation. And then we kind of scroll over here to this one, and then we get this cast shadow. Just pushed back a little bit, giving some space. And then also, so what I think can be sort of useful here to point out as well is these are darker, yes, but also the edge is sharper and firmer. Right, we certainly saw that in the Andrew Loomis drawings that we were looking at with the sphere. That was sort of, it's all softly rendered, and then the cast shadow was very sharp. Right, here we can see a very similar approach, where the form, shaded side, or the form shadow of this object, much softer edge. Right, it's that transition. It's a steep drop off, but there's still a little half tone starts to that models this edge. Then the cast shadow, it's much sharper of an edge quality. So again, see here, as this cast shadow, in the cast shadow example, as it comes closer, right, to the object touching the surface, right, it's from a cast shadow to this drop shadow sort of idea, the edge of the shadow gets much firmer, and then of course it starts to diffuse down here. It gets quite a bit softer. Still, it's much firmer of an edge than the the core shadow and stuff that's sort of rendering the surface of the object versus the shadow that's going to be cast by it. Right, so the edge again. So thinking about edges and edge quality and stuff. This is I think another way to sort of really get your idea across about the um, shadow. So, um, well, I hope that was enjoyable. I imagine, like, it's quite a bit of that you all have covered, and so so thank you for for your attention. And I hope too, like out there, if you're watching us, that there was new information, or just stuff that you really found useful or helpful for your own practice.
It
Um,
brought back some memories from high school art class. So I kind of
awesome.
like, wait a minute, I've learned this.
Yeah, I think so too. But how do we keep it in mind, right? We come back and we refresh every once in a while. We go back over it. It helps to you know uh, helps to keep it pertinent for you. So so you're always like being critical, right, of your own work. You're always being able to you know think about something fundamental in relationship to the work that you're making, and I think it can be can help with the effectiveness, right, of the communication. So yeah,
Yeah,
what do you all think? Any
I think
thoughts?
my problem with this has always been like the simple shapes I always understood, but once you start complicating things, I started getting confused with like what I should be focusing on. But I think it was in the I forget which book it was, but it was The House, seeing that he kind of like flattened things or like he put things into simpler shapes and then based the shadow on that. Was something really simple, but I never thought about
Yeah, I agree. I think it becomes like super simple, and that's how it's readable, right? And it's so different when it's not there at all, and you're like, and
it.
you have to sort of you got to place it. I'm not saying that it is simple. It just becomes it becomes like an answer that makes sense when you know what I mean, and you feel it. It feels right.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because we see shadows all the time. We just see them. We see them constantly. Yeah, like Steven, I can see like there's a great cast shadow on your wall behind you when you lean back a little bit, and I was like, yeah, there's Steven. It's like it's a perfect shape of you. You know what I mean? The in your hat and like in your body, and it's sort of makes perfect sense, and I can sort of think about where the light's coming from. Um, and there's this great sense of depth and space, that's happening. We see them all the time, and so we perceive them, um, but comprehending them is different. It's challenging, and like how do you make it like effective for your artwork? Can be I think it can be perplexing, So try to keep it simple as you can, and it's nobody's perfect. It's not going to be it's not going to be life. It never will be, right? Especially if you're making representations, it's never going to be the same as life. But that's why we study life. We think about life,
I'd
and
like to
mathematics. Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'd
No.
like to maybe I'd consider drawing some of these next week if you'd be down with that. I don't know if you already have a plan for next week, but I think it'd be cool to draw some of these shapes and shadows. And I'd also like to maybe dig a little deeper on this cast shadow versus the other word I can't think of right now.
Drop shadow?
Drop shadow. Yeah, I think that'd be a cool class too, doing a cast shadow versus drop shadow thing. Dig a little deeper into that. I think that it's something that would be very useful for a lot of people. And I think that a lot of people don't have a very good comprehension of it. I know I don't personally. And it's always intimidating to try to put a shadow on something, especially on skin. So I'd love to dig a little deeper on that.
Thank you very much. I think that's it's so helpful for me to to get feedback from from you all about like what are some stuff you're interested in, what are some things that are going to be helpful for you, and so I, it's like because when I look at all of the subject matter and stuff, it's like, and I'm thinking about like what we're going to talk about. I start, I dig into my books or whatever, and I'm like, oh my god, I forgot this, I forgot that. Like, it's what I mean. It's like, oh my god, I don't know any of this shit. So, so I think about, like, so I know nothing, but at the same time, if there's stuff that you're interested in, it's so useful and helpful for me, to sort of like let's talk about it. Certainly, these are like you said, there are things that are like Amber said. This is stuff we talked about in high school. You probably talked about this in high school, right? You probably learned about it a
Yeah.
little bit. And it's like so having a bit of refresh or something like that can be helpful. As far as skin goes, Stephen, I totally understand what you're saying, and and it's like it's nothing more disappointing, right? When you see like somebody does the butterfly and there's like they just wing the cast shadow underneath it, like it's like and it's like terrible looking or something like that. It's
Yeah.
like
I
that
think if you were to
sucks. You know what
Google
I mean?
those,
That's especially like a really beautifully well done butterfly, and then they do some some gross shadow that doesn't work right, and it's like I think taking a step and planning it is useful. So whether that means you do it on paper or or you sketch it out or something on the you know on the body with a marker or whatever, those are all really the best practices, right? And so uh, yeah, I love that. Thank you very much, and I think we can definitely do that next week.
cool.
'Cause I have a few exercises that I think they're essentially this. They're this exact idea. And so even without all that explanation that I gave, like you can still perform these little shadow exercises that I think will again they put the muscle memory in for you. So just sort of doing them, I think a lot can be fun. It can be fun and useful, and then then you take and you grow on it, you expound on it and stuff. So um, yeah, I have. I wanted to show it's almost done. I had a last week we did the basic color in our drawing group, and so I have mine, and I was thinking about it too. This is where I was thinking about the cast shadow idea kind of came from. Um, let's see if I can share my screen. Yeah.
Preacher says I was completely engrossed in today's content.
Well, thanks, creature. That's awesome. Well,
Wait, there's
this is my
more.
little ladybug, that I did for our drawing group. I'll zoom in. So I had to do like a cast shadow, drop shadow thing. There's some cast shadow. I think if I'm sort of thinking about like this foot, this sort of casting it a little bit there. Probably could firm it up a little bit on this edge. This is good for me because I'm like where are all the things I need to focus on. Yeah, and then a little bit stronger of an edge down here, where it's like slightly more diffuse up there. But this was like the sort of I was thinking about inventing this cast shadow. There's a reference, but it doesn't have as as clear of a shadow as I'd like to depict. So this was so I got out my books and I was like, how do you do a shadow again? and so um, I thought it was helpful for me. This is my little this is my little design for our group.
It's so
Gonna
cute.
It's
Thanks.
adorable.
This is gonna it's a two-part series. So this is like the idea would be like on the shoulder. Minimal background was um, the prompt, and then Kyle Olson is gonna lead tonight, and the idea is we're gonna take this concept and do a much more elaborate background, right? So that's Kyle and I were, we're talking about like, like we were sort of trying to collaborate a little bit because I led this, basic color one, and he's doing the advanced color one, exercise. And so the thought was, a lot of times, customer comes in and gets something simple. They come back later and say, "I love it. I want more. Draw a much more elaborate thing for me." So we kind of like, we paint ourselves into a corner, and then we got to paint ourselves out of it. So it's nice because we had the foreknowledge, like we're going to end up doing this thing that's like, we're going to add on to it, we know. But I think it's, this always seemed like the right thing for me was like try to plan ahead, think about that you may add on to something later. You may have to do, you may want to be able to add on to it later. So having some edges that are a little bit softer of the, of the composition and stuff that can help. So yeah, that's that's what I've been working on this week is all of that stuff, and I'm really glad that that it was enjoyable and that it was helpful for y'all, and so I think that next week we're going to take Steven's advice and do some more of these exercises. Really dig down into this. So
I think that's a great idea.
excellent. Yeah, excellent. Well, does anybody have anything else they'd like to share? Any projects you're working on? Any like cool news in your life?
I can show you what I'm working on right now. It's the same thing I was working on last week. Let's see. I'm all tangled up in my yarn. Ooh, it's gotten a lot bigger.
Nice.
Whoa.
There we go. Yeah.
That looks great.
Yeah. So the back's ugly.
Yeah,
But no,
on the graph and the back is supposed to be.
yeah, but I'm gonna end up like putting a backing on it and seeing if I can get it like mounted or something. I've never had anything framed like this, especially not this large. And I'm not really sure how you frame something like this. So we'll see. But yeah, so I'm working on that right now.
Love it. Yeah,
I
definitely.
love fiber art.
It feels like a painting. So I think a frame would be nice for it. Yeah,
well, the rationale behind making this was trying to combine, it's like controlled chaos. So I made it very like painterly I'm sorry, my brain is completely fried right now. Procreate. I made it in Procreate and I made it very like freeform, but I wanted the like control bit to be like, it's a very methodical, like you do it like a printer. So each row you have to do very specific colors. So it's like, it looks very random, but it's done very methodically. And I kind of liked the combination of the two.
I'm agreeing with you. Like I know what you're saying. I get it. Sort of. Not really. It's amazing. Okay. No, I don't.
I get it.
I'm not a fiber artist, so it's just like right over. But it's beautiful. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. It's really coming along too. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, keep it up. Anybody else?
I got lots of inspiration from my camping trip, but I haven't had a chance to put any of it down on paper yet.
No, you need some recovery time. You definitely do.
Yeah.
That sounded like
I haven't even unpacked yet.
When'd you get back?
Awesome.
I got back yesterday about 5:30. And the first thing I did was like, I need to do some shower and I need some real food and I just want my bed.
Yeah. Yeah, that campfire smoke smell is like,
Yes, it was in my hair, it was on my skin, and I'm the one who's always in charge of the campfire. I'm the one who always gets it lit, even when the wood's wet, because it's been raining here for days.
Yeah. No, it's a beautiful thing.
I can't wait to see what inspired you, though.
The trees in winter. I love it when the trees are bare and it's kind of foggy and the only green in the forest is the moss.
Sounds
I love
cozy.
that.
It's awesome. Steven, I want to check in with you. How are you?
Doing all right. I got just an unfinished bug from last week that I'll be adding on to tonight. So it's kind of where I'm at on projects.
I always like put it off until like right before right before we get together. So
Yeah.
like had a slow day yesterday, so I worked on it and I like I'm still like I'm trying to be like positive in front of you all. Like I'm tearing it to pieces in my in my head. So that's just how I mean. That's just how I don't know. It's how it's how I am for sure. Like I
They
just
call that high functioning anxiety.
yeah that
Mm.
yeah that no I'm yeah. You're everybody's your own worst critic.
Yeah.
So um but so Steven's bug is really is beautiful. A beautiful bug, beautiful beetle. With like awesome
Thank you.
horns and shit. So I can't wait to
Yeah,
see it.
cool. Yeah, maybe I'll show it to you guys next week. I should be done with it next week. So, and you'll see
Excellent.
it.
No, that's I think it's yeah. Um, it's so great to see everybody's work and you're making progress on your on your projects and stuff and like for me it's inspiring because like um, again like kind of return to what we were talking about earlier in the beginning like making this list of of your priorities, things you got to do, and then like starting it like a little bit. I work on this a little bit, and I work on that, for a little while. But it's you're organizing it, right? And you're making like again, there's a priority to it, and then there's a concerted effort that you continue to deliver. Progress gets made, right? You make progress on stuff, and it's a lesson I constantly have to learn. And so again, like I'm hanging out with you all is it's a blessing for me. It helps me, helps inspire me, keep me going. So thank you everybody for coming today.
Thank you.
Thanks for for listening and for your attention on this rather dry subject of shadows, but I think it's one that's fascinating, and
Yeah,
again,
it is.
I think that it can really be useful and helpful. So thank you all for the encouragement and
Thank you for explaining it.
my pleasure. Yeah, well, we were just sort of like sort of standing on the shoulders, of those that came before us. Um, so yeah, so thanks to Ernest Norling and to Andrew Loomis for the for the help in us sort of figuring this out, and to Guy Etchison, who also
Absolutely.
explained it in a very succinct way, and his example in
Mhm.
the piece I think is so applicable, right, to our tattooing, right? The little cast shadow from the the earpiece, and then the that more like radical skull chest thing. It's like all the hooks, um, so cool. But that's again, so we learn from each other, and it's how we end up creating the things that we want to see in the world. So um, let's do some sign offs, and then we'll get on about our business today because I'm sure we all have much to do. So Elise, will you give us your sign off, please?
Alrighty, I am Elise Morrow. I graduate in 2 weeks, and you can find me at If you pray, pray for me, and if you don't, just think of me. But
Lots of
you can,
positive vibes.
yeah. But you can find me at Elise Morrow Visuals at on ArtStation and Instagram.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I saw I saw the phonograph.
Yeah, my gramophone.
Gramophone.
Nice.
Holy shit, the thing is amazing. So yeah, follow Elise Morrow Visuals on Instagram, and you can see some of this work. It's like it's really it's quite exquisite. So yeah.
Yep,
So
it's gonna end up in my. Thank you. It's gonna end up in my demo reel. Maybe I'll. It's not. I don't have the actual video done yet, but once it's done, maybe I'll play it for y'all once
Love
it's
that.
done. Yeah.
Love that. Thank you, Elise.
Thank
Amber,
you.
let's have your sign off.
I am Amber Morgaine, and you can find me at Luxury Tattoos and Permanent Cosmetics in Egg Harbor City, New Jersey, or under Amber Morgaine on all social media platforms except Twitter.
Excellent. Yeah, it's fascinating. Again, it was just something that sort of, when you said permanent cosmetics, it's like tattooing tattooing as an industry is becoming regulated by governments all over the world. This is a
Yes.
subject I think that, it should be near and dear to all of our hearts, but it's something that we should continue to talk about. I know there's some really, like useful information out there to kind of wrap your head around what it is that's happening. Um, but tattooer and activist, Ben Shaw has a Discord group that, where all this information is being talked about. So again, you can look up Ben Shaw and and find this Discord group if you're interested. Again, it is about, I think, tattooing industry as a becoming a unity, and so get it in there and get active. And I think this is something that it's gonna affect all of us that tattoo, and then everybody that gets tattoos is gonna affect you too. So so really important. But Amber, it's so great to have you. I'm glad you can make it back. You survived the camp out, and
Yes, I did.
it's so great to have you. So, but and again, thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, Stephen, have your sign off.
I'm Stephen Jesse. You can find me online, StephenJesseTattoos.com, and Instagram at Stephen Jesse.
It's awesome. Thank you so
Thank-
much for coming. Again, I really appreciate your insights, and then like making a suggestion that we keep doing this. That helps me a lot, and um, I think so again, I can't wait to see your artwork tonight. You're really a fantastic artist, and so I'm just it's always great to be with you. It's great to sort of have you here, and so thanks again for coming, Stephen.
Well, thank you, James. I look forward to seeing yours as well. So, always a pleasure, my friend.
Yes, yes, and so with that, I want to plug real quick. We're doing drawing for tattooers at Hell City. So make sure to come to Hell City and say what's up. We'll be at the reinventing table. Um, this has been drawing for tattooers. I'm James Wisdom.